Hello everyone, Mr. Geisler here, and this is going to be Unit 5 homework number 2, which is more solving trig equations. Before we get started on this, I just want to do one quick reminder that you have two inverse functions, and that is cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine theta, and that we have secant of theta is equal to 1 over cosine theta. And we're going to need to use this to solve these equations because our calculator does not have a cosecant button and does not have a secant button. And I just want to point out that sometimes we use a -1 to be an inverse. So for example, if you did something like 2 to the -1, that equals 1 over 2. But when we do our trig functions, when we do sine to the -1, that does not equal 1 over sine. What that equals, or what that is for, is to find the angle if we're given the sine value. So let's take a look at this question now. We're starting with something like this. 3 minus 3 cosecant x equals a -2. So just like before, we want to isolate the trig function, which in this case is cosecant. So I'm going to start by subtracting 3 from both sides. So I have -3 cosecant of x is equal to -5. Divide by a -3, and I get that cosecant, I keep writing, cosecant of x is equal to 5 over 3. Now, because there's no cosecant button, what we're going to do, well, let me write it up here first, 5 over 3, is first of all change that to a sine. Since we look up here, cosecant is equal to 1 over sine, all I have to do is take sine x of the reciprocal, which is 3 over 5. So when you go from cosecant to sine, you just have to flip over the fraction or do the reciprocal of the fraction. The same thing is true if you were doing secant and cosine. So now we have sine, and sine is positive. So I know that sine is positive in the first and second quadrant. Then we're going to solve this just like we would solve a sine question. So all you do in your calculator is do the inverse sine of 3 over 5, and your calculator answer will be 0.644. Once you do that, to find the second answer, so 0.644, all you need to do is do pi minus 0.644, and that will give us 2.498. And that's going to be our second answer. Now we're going to take a look at a tangent question. Now we're going to kind of group tangent and cotangent together because they have a lot of similarities. So the first thing I want to do is point out that tangent of theta is equal to 1 over cotangent of theta, which is the same thing as saying the cotangent of theta is equal to 1 over the tangent of theta. So again, if you're given a cotangent question, you have to just do the reciprocal and use tangent in your calculator. But since this one is a tangent question, it'll look something like this. -4 minus 5 times the tangent of x is equal to 0. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and I get -5 times the tangent of x is equal to 4. Divide by a -5, and I end up with the tangent of x is equal to a -4/5. So that's what's going to go in this box here. Now, tangent is negative in the second and the fourth quadrant, so it could be in either of those. However, since tangent only has a period of pi, I'm only going to ask that you give one solution for tangent. So whenever we're doing tangent, we only do one solution. So all you need to do is put that in your calculator like this, and your calculator answer should be -0.675 when rounded to 3 decimal places. And we only have to do one answer for this one. Okay, let's take a look at another cosine question. This one's just a little different because in the parentheses after cosine, we don't just have x, we have an expression, x minus 2. So let's take a look at how to solve this. I'm going to start with my original equation, negative 6 minus 2 cosine x minus 2 equals a negative 7. So in this case, I want to isolate the cosine of x minus 2. So I'm going to do that by adding 6 to both sides to start off with, and that gives me negative 2 cosine x minus 2 is equal to a negative 1. Divide by a negative 2, divide by a negative 2, and I get the cosine of x minus 2 is equal to 1/2. Now, we're going to proceed with this question just how we did in all the previous ones. I'm just going to do the inverse cosine of 1/2 in my calculator. When I do that, I'm going to end up with 1.047. Now, we know with cosine that you have the positive and you just do the opposite of that answer. So my second answer is negative 1.047. But that's not going to be my final answer because it's x minus 2 that equals that, not just x. So I have to do x minus 2 equals 1.047. So I add 2 and I add 2, and I get x is equal to 3.047. And then I also have to do x minus 2 equals a negative 1.047. So here I add 2 and I add 2, and when I do that, I get that x is equal to 0.953. So those will be my two answers that I put in here, 0.953 and 3.047. Up here, the cosine of x minus 2, that's this part of the expression here, is equal to 1/2.